We come to our last panel for this conference. We come to the panel about referenda at home and overseas. We'll be comparing dynamics and impact, and we'll be listening to presentations about two referenda, one in Gibraltar and the second one in Northern Ireland. And well, let me introduce the first speaker, Mut Bosque, who is from the International University of Barcelona, and we'll be talking about the sovereignty referenda in Gibraltar as a means of self-determination. So Dr. Mut Bosque holds a European PhD in legal and social sciences, a degree in law and a degree in political sciences, a master's degrees in international studies, and postgraduate diplomas in European Union law, public law, and political science. Dr. Mut has been the Deputy Dean of the Faculty of Law and is currently a lecturer of international and European Union law at the International University of Catalonia, Barcelona, and she has been a visiting research fellow of the Institute of Commonwealth Studies since 2009. She has published her work focused on the Commonwealth universe in prestigious publications such as the Island Studies Journal, the Commonwealth and Comparative Politics, the Roundtable Journal, and the Journal of Mediterranean Studies. So without further ado, Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chatterji. And I would like to thank you, the organizers, for inviting me to participate to this interesting conference. Special thanks to Dr. Melanie Terrain and to Dr. Adrian Roth, and of course to Dr. Philippe Murphy. It's a real honor to have had the chance to listen to all the distinguished speakers of this conference. I don't know if if you can see my presentation.
Yes, we can.
Okay, now, great. Gibraltar is one of the 14 British overseas territories, and its status is the result of an evolutionary historical process. Before the 1981 British Nationality Act, British overseas territories were considered colonies under British law. After 1981, they were renamed British Dependent Territories, and since 2002, they have been British overseas territories. Today, the UK government has responsibility for the international relations, defense, and good governance of the overseas territories. And in some of them, the UK government is also responsible for internal security. The overseas territories have their own constitutions and domestic laws. Each British overseas territory is constitutionally unique. The degree of self-government depends on the British overseas territories' constitutional relationship with the UK. Most of these overseas territories are largely autonomous with regard to their internal affairs, as is the case with Bermuda, Gibraltar, or the Falkland Islands. The common feature among them is the recognition of the UK's sovereignty, acknowledgement of the Queen as the head of state, and British citizenship. Regarding the position of the United Nations to Gibraltar, the British overseas territories are considered as non-self-governing territories by the United Nations Special Committee, also known as the C24. Today, there are still 17 territories on the United Nations list of non-self-governing territories, despite the fact that the international community has made great efforts over almost 6 decades in order to end the era of colonialism. However, in the case of Gibraltar, we wonder how accurate it is to categorize this territory as still pending of decolonization. If we consult the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 1541, this resolution lays out the three options, or the three possible options that the General Assembly considers to be acceptable outcomes of self-determination for the purposes of decolonization. These three options are independence, free association, and integration. According to Perham, this resolution sets out criteria to determine when a territory has achieved one of the three currently accepted statuses for decolonization. However, if a different status is to be selected, there is not a clear set of criteria which determine whether the choice of any given fourth option can appropriately be considered an exercise of self-determination. Academics have indicated the need to explore alternative outcomes of decolonization. For instance, Wolfers has highlighted the need to clarify, refine, and possibly redefine the options available as outcomes of decolonization, and suggested that C24 should consider the issue afresh, especially in the light of Secretary General's call for innovative approaches and new dynamics in the fight to end colonialism. Both administering states and non-self-governing territories have indicated support for a fourth option. The United States and the United Kingdom have both said the C24 is wrong to insist on a single and narrow standard for decolonization. Gibraltar has advocated for a fourth option. In 2007, the representative of Gibraltar said at the C24 regional seminar that the classic models of decolonization may not be appropriate by virtue of the individual circumstances and characteristics of these territories. Regarding referenda in Gibraltar, the first referendum was held in September of 1967. This referendum is also known as the sovereignty referendum. This referendum, Gibraltarian citizens were asked whether they wished to pass under Spanish sovereignty, with Gibraltarians keeping the British citizenship and a special status for Gibraltar within Spain, or remain under British sovereignty with its own self-governing institutions. An overwhelming 99% of the voters favored the option to remain under British sovereignty with its own self-governing institutions. Surprisingly, the Special Committee on Decolonization was informed in advance of the referendum and invited to observe. The invitation was declined, and instead, the United Nations General Assembly passed Resolution 2353, which requested that the United Kingdom enter into negotiations with Spain and criticized the United Kingdom for holding a referendum. Curiously, at that time, Spain was under dictatorship of General Franco. So that's quite shocking. In principle, this committee should defend self-determination, the self-determination principle of the people of a dependent territory. As a result of the referendum, a constitutional conference was held in Gibraltar in 1968, where they met representatives of the United Kingdom government, Gibraltar's elect members, and the integration with Britain party representatives in order to agree a constitution for Gibraltar. The constitution was finally adopted in 1969, and the most remarkable part of this constitution was the preamble. Despite its political relevance, it is important to remark that from a legal perspective, a preamble has no legally binding effects. However, it has a real political relevance, and this preamble has been replicated in Gibraltar's current 2006 constitution. Spanish reaction to the Constitutional Conference was not a surprise. On the 8th of June of 1969, Spain closed the border with Gibraltar. The decision came when General Franco was angered at the prospect of Gibraltar's new constitution. He was afraid this could negatively affect Spain's sovereignty claim of the rock. In 2001, the Spanish President Aznar and the British Prime Minister Tony Blair started secret negotiations to resolve the dispute over Gibraltar, based on a co-sovereignty formula between the UK and Spain. However, this proposal was understood by Gibraltar as a betrayal. And the deal between Spain and the UK was never materialized. Instead, before the deal was reached, the government of Gibraltar held an unofficial referendum in 2002. It did not have the support of the UK government. The referendum is known as the Joint Sovereignty Referendum, and the result was clear. Almost 99% of Gibraltarians refuse it. So it has no sense to keep on offering this option, the joint sovereignty option, to Gibraltarians, since they refuse it. This same year, the 2002, Gibraltar and the rest of dependent territories became British overseas territories. And in 2006, a new constitution for Gibraltar was agreed, which enhanced the level of self-governance and recognized the right of self-determination. However, the sovereignty of Gibraltar is a controversial issue in Anglo-Spanish relations because Spain asserts a claim over the territory. The traditional Spanish stance is based on territorial integrity. As per United Nations resolution, have encouraged the parties to settle the dispute in a negotiated way. So any definitive solution needs to include Spain from a United Nations perspective. However, from the UK perspective, after the bitter experience in 2001, the UK has repeatedly assured that any solution will need to include the will of the people of Gibraltar. So, in terms of sovereignty, British overseas territories are not sovereign, but they are autonomous and self-governing, with their own independent legal, administrative, and fiscal systems. They have their own directly elected legislative assemblies and their own courts of law. Therefore, so these territories have a great degree of self-government. They are not independent. They are not part of the United Kingdom, so they cannot elect representatives to Westminster. Therefore, all issues related to their internal affairs fall under the competence of each of these territories. Of the powers for which the UK is responsible, the most controversial one is the good governance power. In practice, this means that if the UK regards good governance as not being assured by the local government, then the UK can impose direct rule on it. The circumstances in which the UK can impose direct rule have not been well developed. So in any case, this subsidiary power reserved for the UK is an important restriction to the territory's internal self-government. Today, the scope of sovereignty is undergoing constant change. For instance, according to Princeton and Blaise, non-self-governing islands are actively creating a new form of sovereignty, an islandian sovereignty. In this sense, most of today's non-self-governing territories do not seem to strive for political independence from their colonial metropoles in a classic Westphalian definition. They are actively and creatively modifying the molds of Westphalian sovereignty. Baldacchino points out that much like the binary numeral system, sovereignty is often treated as indivisible. It is either 0 or 1. You either are sovereign or you are not, with hardly any room for dithering in between. But this assumption is false. It is far of the inherent governmentality of states to challenge and test this yes or no principle. There is no doubt that Gibraltar has developed a new form of sovereignty. The current status of Gibraltar, its level of self-government, and its relationship with the UK is comparable to the free association status, which is recognized by the United Nations as one possible status for a non-self-governing territory. The free association status is a complex one, and it does not designate a uniform reality. Generally speaking, free association status agreements materialize in a founding treaty establishing the terms of the association, the division of powers, and the possibility of withdrawal following certain requirements. A free associated state freely and voluntarily agrees to pool part of its sovereignty and associate with a sovereign state, usually through a founding or constitutive treaty. In return, the associated state receives political, commercial, fiscal, or social advantages, such as dual citizenship, free market access, the same currency, tax exceptions, tax rebates, or certain social benefits, among others. The degree and type of advantages, as well as the degree of the concessions of powers, depend on what the parties agree. Commonly, the associated state transfers powers in the areas of defense and international relations. So we can see there are similar issues that these two status share. Gibraltar, we can say that Gibraltar is satisfied with its current status, at least has no officially requested a change in it. Moreover, this territory has repeatedly asked to be removed from the list, from the United Nations list, and believes that its presence on the United Nations list of non-self-governing territories is an anachronism. So we argue that the C24 should be more open-minded, particularly if this status has been repeatedly chosen by the citizens of the territory. I think that this is the real essence of the principle of self-determination. Regarding the British Overseas Territory status, the C24 needs to go beyond the denomination and focus on the real content of the status. If it is carefully analyzed, the committee will note that there are a great number of coincidences between the British Overseas Territory status and the Free Association status. So finally, the new challenges for Gibraltar. It is true that statuses need to evolve and adapt to the new circumstances in order to face the different challenges. In 2016, a new international challenge with direct consequences for Gibraltar arose: the UK's decision to leave the European Union. Gibraltar made clear its position on Brexit in the 2016 referendum. Unlike the UK, the 96% of Gibraltarians voted in support of remaining in the European Union. In this sense, Gibraltarians have been great supporters of the European Union project. However, Gibraltar dependent status gave no option to remain part of the European Union and had to follow the UK's decision to leave. So Brexit has entailed for territories like Gibraltar to reflect deeply upon their current statuses. Gibraltar's current status as a dependent territory of the United Kingdom entails uncertainty for Gibraltar's future relations, particularly in the international scenario. Finally, in my opinion, even if Gibraltar is satisfied with its internal status, it needs to consider updating it, or at least including more mechanisms which allow this territory to actively participate in the international scenario and represent its own interests in a direct way. If not, it will have to be ready that the UK will place its own interests above Gibraltar interests in case there is a contradiction. The updating of its status will need to be dealt with in a cautious manner due to the historical and political peculiarities of Gibraltar, and will surely require an ad hoc solution. Gibraltarians have never been consulted on all the possible statuses that they could acquire. The alternatives have been restrictedly put forward. So perhaps it's time for a new status that allows Gibraltar to develop its international identity. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks again, Maria, for your very interesting presentation. So we'll be taking questions now. If you have any questions, as usual, you can ask them through the chat. You can unmute your mic, or you can raise your hand just like Adrian has just done. So Adrien, we're listening to you.
Thank you. And thank you, Maria. That was very interesting indeed. I was particularly interested by your suggestion at the beginning that perhaps the criteria set forward by the United Nations for what constitutes decolonization are, well, need updating. That we need to move beyond the three currently established criteria. And your suggestion that in a way Gibraltar has found its way to its own particular form of self-determination, but that perhaps you said perhaps that too needs now to be updated and to include a form of self-determination in foreign affairs, in international affairs. And so I was wondering whether you would suggest, perhaps simply, although it wouldn't be quite as simple as that, but whether you would suggest that Gibraltar should, whether Gibraltarians should be offered the option of Gibraltar being officially recognized as a state in free association with the United Kingdom, which would enable it to be recognized, to be removed from the decolonization list, the list of non-self-governing territories. And I agree it's absurd that it's still on the list because it clearly is self-governing. And at the same time, perhaps to give it the status of having a voice on international affairs. I mean, I'm thinking, for example, of in the Pacific, the Cook Islands in Europe.
Sorry, keep you waiting.
Okay, shall I just finish my question?
Yeah, go ahead.
In the Pacific, we have the Cook Islands and Niue, which are states in free association with New Zealand, and de facto, they've adopted the right of having their own foreign policy, and New Zealand has simply accepted it, which shows that that status, is inclusive of that possibility of having a voice on international affairs. So, yeah, I was just wondering what you think of that. Should Gibraltarians simply be given the option to vote on the status of free association?
Well, thank you very much, Adrian, for this interesting question. I don't really know if I am suggesting a free association status for Gibraltar, but it could be a possibility, or at least I think it should be consulted to Gibraltarians, because it's a way of removing this territory from the United Nations list, as you say. And also, it's a way that Gibraltar is able to develop an international identity. And things that issues like Brexit do not have this direct impact that it's going to have for Gibraltar. So I think it's a good option. I think that the problem would be with Spain and this triangle relationship between the United Kingdom, Spain, and Gibraltar. I'm not too sure about well, I'm sure what Spain will say about this. It will say, no, it's not possible, but I'm not too sure if this will be an exception of the Treaty of Utrecht, and it will be acceptable for or according to this treaty. But anyway, I think it is necessary to explore this possibility and see what are the reactions. I think it's normal that statutes need to develop, need to evolve, because it has no sense to have a monolithic status, and this is not possible in a globalized world. That there are too many challenges, especially for these territories. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Are there any more questions in relation to this presentation? Okay, so apparently Philippe is back. Can we just try to see if we can hear him? Philippe, can you? No, nothing seems to work apparently. In that case, I suppose, Philippe, we'll have to see with you how you are able to share your presentation with the conference, and I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the presentations today. We'll be taking a few more questions in relation to Maria's presentation now, and I hope we'll be able to sort the problem. So still on Gibraltar. I'm going to slip in a question then if no one's ready to ask one. I was wondering about the diverse attitudes of Spain towards Gibraltar, especially Catalonia, which itself is seeking some form of independence. Are there differences in Spanish views of the questions? That would be one part of my question. A second part of my question would be the public debate in Gibraltar since 2016. So since the overwhelming majority of the people of Gibraltar have voted for remaining, and Britain has left the European Union, what shape has public debate taken since then? So a two-part question, if I may.
Thank you very much, Mark. Regarding the first question, it's very difficult to answer this question, but what we could say is that the question of Gibraltar and the question of Catalonia are different. The question of Gibraltar is treated under colonial terms. So in principle, this territory, as it was a colony, a former colony of the United Kingdom, has the right to self-determination. And it is recognized by its constitution, as I think Adrian told us. And regarding Catalonia, as is an integral part of Spain, and it has never been treated as a colony, it has no right of self-determination from an international perspective. Another thing would be if the Spanish constitution allowed it, it could happen. The problem is that the Spanish constitution does not allow to independence. This is, an internal question that Spain needs to resolve from an internal point of view, or from a constitutional perspective. And regarding the second question, what I know is that now Gibraltar is trying to negotiate with Spain what is going to happen after Brexit. What is the scenario? Because Gibraltar geographically needs to be part of the European Union. Perhaps it's not possible to achieve it from the way it was, but Gibraltar needs to look for a solution, a definitive solution, Gibraltar cannot have a border there, because then it will be isolated. So needs to negotiate with Spain. I know that negotiations are well, Spain and Gibraltar are having negotiations. I know they are at a good point, but we will see if what they have promised in this negotiation, both parties are going to fulfill it. And I think I have replied to your questions. Thank you very much, Mark.
Yes, you certainly have. I think there are some questions in the discussion. So I'll just read it. The question is, what is the status of Gibraltar in relation to the Commonwealth? Its participation in some Commonwealth events or institutions gives it an international status. What are the legal implications in constitutional terms? So essentially, what's the status of Gibraltar in relation to the Commonwealth?
Well, thank you for this interesting question. Gibraltar is not a member state of the Commonwealth because it's not a state, so it's a different relationship. And it is true that it's not part of the United Kingdom. It's not an integral part of the United Kingdom. It's a British overseas territory. However, it is represented by the United Kingdom. I argue that if Gibraltar keeps on developing a new status or a new formula, or they look for new mechanisms, then it will be possible that Gibraltar could be participate in the Commonwealth as a full member, but it needs to change the status, or at least to look for some mechanisms that allow this possibility. There is a mechanism in British law that is called the entrustment, and this legal instrument allows British overseas territories and the Crown dependencies to have a role in international relations. However, it's a complicated mechanism, and it needs the will of the United Kingdom and the British overseas territory in order to develop it. And what are the, you also asked me if there are some Commonwealth events or institutions that give, yes, I think that Gibraltar has participated in different events of the Commonwealth, but not as a full member, but it has participated in some events of the Commonwealth. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. I think there's another question, but so it's Chandra. I don't think we can hear you. So you can type your question, and in the meantime, Amal has a question. Do you want me to read it?
Yes, please.
Yes. Okay. How do you think the official position of Spain towards Gibraltar relates to its position towards the enclaves of, I'm not sure how to pronounce this.
Ceuta and Melilla.
Okay.
Wow, that's really, really an interesting question. Really a very good, a really interesting question. Well, Spain's official position is that Gibraltar and Ceuta and Melilla are different issues that have to be solved in a different way. But sometimes it's very complicated to understand it. The thing is that in the case of Ceuta and Melilla, Spain offered them integration. That's why they were not included, or they were removed, or they couldn't be included in the United Nations list of self-government territories, because as they were offered integration and they are part of Spain, they are autonomous cities, then they are not in the same, or they don't share the same problem than Gibraltar. Gibraltar is not an integral part of the United Kingdom. It's a British overseas territory. And as I explained, for the C24, the only three possible options are independence, integration, or the free association status. Ceuta and Melilla opted for integration, then they have fulfilled with the United Nations requirements. However, Gibraltar did not choose any of the three options, and that's the reason that still is in that list. So this is the different position that Spain has towards these different territories, but sometimes it's hard to explain it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hello, can you hear me, Mark?
Yes, yes, I can hear you. Please ask your question.
I think it's basically it's about, and I'm just a follow-on question from the chat question I posed. As compared to European Union, Commonwealth is a non-treaty organization. So does participation in a non-treaty organization does it give the same status, rights in international law as participating in European Union institutions? So how does Gibraltar see its enhanced participation apart from the Commonwealth Games or membership of some of the Commonwealth's key institutions?
You are really right, Vala, and it's a pleasure to say hello to you. Yeah, I totally agree with your comment. It's the difference between both organizations, between the European Union and the Commonwealth. And I think that Gibraltar can have a chance in both of them can have a role in the Commonwealth, an enhanced role in the Commonwealth, I think. And I hope Gibraltar is able to reach an agreement with Spain and can have a role in the European Union too. I think it's not incompatible to be part of both organizations. And well, I think Gibraltar will finally succeed. Thank you very much, Vala.
Okay, thank you, Maria.
Thank you very much. Okay. If there are no further questions, I might ask another very naive question. I was just wondering, Maria, if there are any concrete implications related to the fact that Gibraltar is on the list of countries pending decolonization. Is this purely a symbolical message sent by the United Nations, or is there any form of pressure being put to change the situation on the part of the United Nations?
I don't think it's well. I don't really know how to answer, because what I know is that nowadays Gibraltar and the UK have lost their interest in convincing the C24 to remove this territory from the list. I think that they have explained several times that they are happy with, or they are satisfied with the current status. But the C24 has not modified its view. I don't really know why, but well, they consider that Gibraltar has not is still pending of self-determination. So I mean, I know this position, the UK position and Gibraltar position, but I don't really know if the committee still is convinced about this decision, or their decision of including Gibraltar in this territory. I think that perhaps as Spain keeps on claiming the sovereignty of Gibraltar, perhaps it's not an issue that can be easily solved till Spain and the UK reach an agreement. And perhaps this is the thing that explains why Gibraltar is still in this list.
Thank you very much. Right. So if there are no further questions, I'll hand over to Melanie, knowing that Philippe has not been able to reconnect for the moment. So Melanie, would you like to
yes,
say a few words?
I think unfortunately we seem to have lost Philippe completely, and we tried to phone him, but I don't think he was anyway. So apologies about this, and I think we'll do as suggested and see if Philippe can share his work with us in a different format. But no, I mean, I think, you know, we seem therefore to have reached the end of the conference, and it's been, you know, a fascinating 2 days, and I think particular thanks to everyone who's you know, been with us for the whole 2 days, and who've given us a lot of food for thought and very stimulating conversations. I don't know whether, you know, anyone else would like to say a few words, Philippe, or
yeah, very, I mean, very happy.
Closing,
very happy to, Melanie, and really just to thank you and your team for organising this so well. I mean, the online format is always liable to blips, and but I think the benefits vastly outweigh the problems that we have with it. You know, in terms of being able to assemble such a diverse range of scholars from across Europe. And I really wanted to go back to something that Stuart was talking about, that this issue of referenda, which has been raised, and Maria's excellent paper also sort of raised that issue, that there is maybe the potential for a really interesting collaborative research bit around this. So I think that we'll talk about this, but if people have their own thoughts about how we might go forward with something, I'm sure Melanie and I would be very happy to coordinate further discussions on this. And it strikes me that this is it's a really important issue. It lends itself perfectly to a collaborative research bid, and so, you know, certainly I'd be very happy to follow up on that. But just finally, again, thanks to all our speakers for such a fantastic conference, and thank you, Melanie, for bringing it all together.
Yeah, well, yes, a final thank you to everyone, because it's I think it's been a pleasure working all together to you know, to bring these 2 days together, and yes, absolutely, it certainly generated lots of I think both sort of ideas for new projects, but also sort of, as I think I was saying this morning, sort of looking back at some of the things we've done and ways of revisiting it, and that certainly more collaborative work on this would be tremendous. So yes, we do hope that it can be taken to, you know, forward in some ways. And just on a closing note as well, I think one of the drawbacks perhaps of online events is that we can't have the coffee breaks, and we can't have any of this. So if any of you want to sort of stay on less formally for a few minutes and have a chat, have a drink, a cup of tea, or anything, by all means. I've got the hand on the meeting, so I'm quite aware of the fact that when I end it, it will end. But yeah, feel free if you want further conversations to stay on. But yes, so once again, a great thank you to everyone, and hopefully see you very soon for more on all of this.